Well, you just said something interesting there, and that is a good segue to jump into the single family housing. Right now, across the United States, you have family members working side by side,
Mhm.
husbands, wives, partners, maybe side beside their children doing
Yep.
virtual school. Um, what does the house of the future look like? Do we have to account for work from home?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think working from home is definitely part of it. But you mentioned earlier about the online learning. If that's going to be something that occurs, is there going to be a space for that outside of the individual's bedroom where they could have this learning environment? And is that kind of an officey space? I definitely could see single family homes having new programming space to allow for offices, in many cases, multiple offices in the floor plans.
Yeah.
I definitely see that occurring.
So it's interesting. In my unique situation, both my wife and I work from home, and our home is 2 stories plus a finished basement. So I'm in the dungeon. I'm in the basement here. She's 2 floors above me. We often go a full day without even seeing each other unless we cross paths in the kitchen. Uh,
Right.
that's something that works well for us. But I look on Facebook and I see some of my friends and colleagues sitting at their dining room table beside their spouse or their partner. And
Yeah.
they're like, okay, this isn't a long term solution here.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think most individuals are set up in homes much like your colleagues, not like yourself.
Right.
Unfortunately, or they're
Yes.
crowded around a kitchen table or something, and that's going to change, I think, going forward in terms of design. And it might be just retrofitting. It may be as simple as retrofitting some existing spaces in existing
Yeah.
home. But I could see new homes that are being built accommodating this new program. So I could see that changing.
Yeah, I do too. And I think just look at the way housing design has evolved over the past 30 years. My home is more traditional. There is a formal living room that
Right.
the dog is the only house occupant that ever occupies that space. There's
Right.
the formal dining room, which means we have a dining room table that's just stacked with junk on it because it's a
Except for
storage
Thanksgiving.
except for Thanksgiving. That's right. So these are spaces that families aren't using anyway.
Right. Right.
So single family housing, Bill, when we talk about uh, the AEC industry as a whole, we often start by talking about the health of single family and how much of it drives our industry. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good point because not only is single family homes a large percentage of what is designed and built, and we kind of don't think of it in that regard, but more importantly, it drives demographics, which drives everything else. So where people are building and owning and living in houses, you're going to want to have schools nearby. You're going to want to have churches and synagogues. You're going to want to have retail nearby. It's kind of what we do as human beings. We want those amenities and services that we need nearby. So that drives, and of course, you need the roads to get to these. So residential population shifts, all that type of thing drives pretty much every other industry we've talked about for the last number of minutes here.
Yeah. And where I have a concern where the AEC industry is going is that, again, the loss of wealth.
Yeah.
The millennials already were not buying housing to the levels that prior generations were.
Right.
So there was never a big millennial housing boom, even though it's a giant generation. Uh,
Right.
Millennials are still saddled with college debt and underemployment and now unemployment. What is the demand for these single family homes over the next 5 to 10 years? Even as people that might normally be ready to buy, are they going to be a little skittish about it just based upon their experience in 2020?
Yeah, I think they are. They're going to be a little skittish that the value is going to go down. They're concerned about whether they want to put that big chunk of money in for a down payment. I think there's going to be a lot of concerns by individuals going forward. Um, and obviously, single family housing and multifamily housing work hand in hand. because as population grows, they need some place to live. It's just a matter of how many live in one household and whether it's in a multifamily environment or a single family environment. And the other thing is where. There's been discussions for a number of years now that the kind of rural areas of our country are going to, I don't want to say boom, but more people will want that, 5 acres with the home in the middle of it. Will that increase? There's something else we're not talking about too, is how does this impact vacation homes? How does this impact second residences, which became popular over the last 20 years? It's always been popular, but it really extended. What happens to those? Are they going to be impacted because of, we could get into the whole sea level rise and all that type of discussion.
Right.
As far as from the financial side of things, is that going to be impacted by this?
Yeah, and you look at what's happening in the news right now, people that do have second homes or vacation homes aren't even allowed to go there right now.
Yeah, right.
States like, Florida didn't want the New Yorkers coming in. I just heard in Delaware, they're pulling over Pennsylvania license plates to try to keep them away from the beaches.
Yep.
So you own the property, you should be entitled to your property, but you're not allowed to access it. So what does that mean for the future?
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
The other thing I think we should just talk about briefly before we leave the single family homes is the tightening of money. Right now, as we're doing this, it's April 2020. So some indicators from March are just coming out, and one of them that was just released was the availability of mortgages declined 16% from February to March, and it's projected to go further in April. So right now, not a lot of people are buying homes, but those that want to are having limited access to the funds.
Is it because the funds aren't available, or they're tightening up the quality of the funds?
I think it's probably a little bit of both.
Okay.
Right now, banks are lending so much to business to help be the stopgap, or they're running the federal dollars through it, but there's always a lag in getting money. I think banks are just, both for commercial and residential lending, for real estate, they're just really tightening up on things right now.
Yeah, that's the availability of money. Obviously, is always an issue. And that's going to be a supply and demand thing. At some point, then interest rates are going to potentially draw back up, so impacting more individuals from the ability of owning a home.
Yeah.
So you can't. In addition to the demographics we just talked about driving our industry, the other is access to money. That drives our industry, whether you're an institution or a governmental entity or a private developer.
Yeah. Which is why single family housing, residential developments is such a bellwether for our industry. Once that starts picking up, everything else is going to follow.